Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's Investor Education. I'm Kat Delgadillo, here to co-host our event with our CEO, Hall Martin, who's going to give you a little more information about 10 Capital and what we do here. Hall?
Great. Thanks, Kat. I want to thank everybody for joining us today for another great round of presentations. We have with us today Grid Matrix that will be pitching, as well as Fintegrate technology. We'll also have with us Angela Lee, lessons learned from 20,000 startup pitches, and I'll be giving a presentation on cap tables, what you need to know about them. So before we get into that, let's talk more about 10 Capital and what we're doing. For those who are not familiar with us, I want to welcome you to today's virtual event. Next slide. And want to tell you more about what we're doing here. So at heart, 10 Capital helps startups and growth companies and investors, raise funding through our program. It's an it's event-based structured program. And we also advise on fundraising strategies. We help with valuation comps, redo pitch decks, and also we build due diligence reports. If you're looking for a diligence report, this is a great place to get a comprehensive version for your fundraise. In short, we provide the legwork, saving you time and money. Next slide. In addition to working with angels to look at our deals, we also work with high net worth individuals. We help them start family offices. We also help VC funds find limited partners through our family offices, and we help our angel groups find members. At heart, we're forming capital for the startup ecosystem, bringing more funding dollars to the table. Next slide. In addition to today's event, we also have the Family Office Roundtable. It's a 2-hour session for family offices and those who want to start family offices on topics relevant to running a family office. Next up, we also have the Quick Pitch, which is a session, 2-hour online event like this one for tech companies and what they're doing. And finally, we also have the Life Science Syndicate, which is the same for life science companies. If you want to learn more about our events, go to 10capital.group and click on the events button, and you can see all the events we have coming up, both online and in person. If you're a startup raising funding, take a picture of that QR code, please, and that'll send your information to us, and we'll talk with you about joining our program to see if it's a good fit. We, like I say, have been doing this since 2009. We were originally called Texas Entrepreneurs Network. We're now called 10 Capital. We do this around the country, and we're continuing to grow. We also are moving heavily into AI. We have built our own chatbot we call Ava. We have an Investor Connect podcast program with over 800 interviews with angel VCs and family offices on what they invest and how they invest in startups. Great way to learn. And we've also write the Startup Funding Espresso, which in the time it takes to drink an espresso, you can learn something about startup funding and investing. It's a 300-word micro blog post, and it's a 1.5-minute audio clip. And we've built over 2,000 of these and have since put all of them into the AI chat box. We are growing this and developing this to provide additional tools around due diligence and analysis for our investors and our startups. And we're continuing to grow this so we can make it available in a bigger way to you in the future. But let's hear more about the current chatbot in what we have on the website today under what's called the startupfundingespresso.com website.
Hi there. I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Ava, your personal AI venture assistant. I'm your new best friend in the world of investing in startups, the 10 Capital AI chatbot. I'm here to make your journey through the startup ecosystem easier, faster, and a lot more fun. Need help finding your next big investment? Or maybe you're a founder looking for fundraising tips? I've got you covered. I pull all my knowledge from over 500 blogs, countless podcasts, and even some nifty calculators, like the How Fundable Is Your Startup tool, to give you the answers you need. So how do I work? Easy. You simply go to where I live on startupfundingespresso.com and look for me in the bottom right. As soon as I appear, go ahead and click on me to let me know you're here. And then there you go. All your questions answered at your fingertips. Whether you're into health tech, biotech, life sciences, or any of the other exciting fields out there, I'm equipped to help you navigate the trends, challenges, and opportunities in each one. Got a question? Just ask. And guess what? I even pull insights from the 10 Capital Network podcast on Investor Connect. It's packed with expert advice, success stories, and more, all designed to help you succeed in the venture capital world. So what are you waiting for? Let's chat. I'm here 24/7 to help you find the right answers, connect with great opportunities, and make the most out of your investments. See you on startupfundingespresso.com.
Great. And with that, let's go ahead and kick into our first presenter today. We have with us from Grid Matrix, Mike Areen. Each company today will get 10 minutes to pitch and 5-minute Q&A. For those in the audience, please put your questions in the chat box and we'll answer those as they come up. With that, Mike, go ahead and launch your slides and kick off when ready.
Will do. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining. And let's turn this into big screen. I'm Mike Areen. I'm COO and co-founder of Grid Matrix, the infrastructure AI. When we talk about infrastructure, we serve critical infrastructure. So roads, airports, rail ports, highways. And we work with primarily governmental organizations to help understand and optimize the environment that they run. So I like to start with a quick overview of the company, and then we can go into the problem, the solution set. So we're a cloud-based scalable software platform. Our economic model is a yearly SaaS subscription that we sell to our customers. We have 9 current customers across airports, ports, and roadways. Last year, our revenue was $550K. This year, we're targeting $3 million. The overall market that we play in and disrupt is the $1 trillion U.S. civil engineering market that's primarily dominated by large public companies like Jacobs and AECOM. We're disrupting that space by being a software-first solution. We also have statewide contract wins, which allow us to sell directly into multiple states across the country. The primary process you sell to governments, for those not familiar, is you submit RFPs or public bids, as public entities tend to have to multiple source and make transparent their process. But when you win these statewide hunting license, you can go directly to them, which is a big advantage for us. It's very rare that a startup wins these. It's kind of the thing that we care about most internally. A lot of time outsiders don't quite understand why we highlight it. We're based in Austin, Texas. And our current funding round, in which we're seeking about another 500K, is led by 8VC, who's our primary investor. Okay, so what is the problem that we're actually addressing? Basically, the operators of these infrastructure pieces have tons of questions that can only be answered by data, which they currently have no access to. Most of these organizations are kind of operating in the pre-2000 era, where they're doing things anecdotally or by real-time monitor by people sitting watching feeds, like the picture of the guy in the Georgia DOT on the left, one guy monitoring thousands of cameras. These questions that all of these different operators have range from: how often do we have vehicles idle more than 5 minutes at the departure curve? Port operators, I want to alert when a boat leaves a dock. Transportation planners, what are the most dangerous intersections in terms of near miss and actual accidents? Public works engineer, I want to actively manage rush hour traffic and know when to switch the reversible lane. So all these things are currently kind of done either by one-time expensive studies or just anecdotally. We're trying to bring them into the modern era. So what's our solution? Our solution plugs into existing sensors, and that's a key distinction that we have. Our competitors tend to build their own hardware and charge large fees to install it. We plug into existing sensors, primarily cameras, and convert those into a data set that we serve back to our customer. So you can imagine a camera that watches an intersection. We turn that into a 24-hour essentially data set that shows every object that moved through it and all of the interesting interactions and KPIs around those objects, including emissions, safety, and traffic congestion. We can serve this data kind of on a historical basis. So over time, you can build up an understanding of how your infrastructure works. You can understand, what features and parameters make an intersection work well, what light timing, how many lanes. So you can actually start designing these things in an intelligent way. We also serve this data back in a real-time way. We can trigger alerts when certain things happen, like a car stopped or an accident. and other real-time indications, which will eventually allow us to plug into the actual controller units that control things like intersections and change the algorithm of the traffic timing in real time. We're built to be kind of robust and for large customers. Our kind of current customer set are some of the largest infrastructure operators in the world. This is not like a small company SaaS product. This is an enterprise grade product. To make this a little bit more germane, here's an example of how Orlando is using us to retime their traffic signals.
Now, artificial intelligence is being used to help solve that problem. The goal here is to pinpoint any changes that might need to be made to make the road safer. Fox 35's Chris Lindsay explains how this new technology works. Reduce fatalities and serious injuries down to zero. That's the traffic safety department. That's the whole part of it.
Can you turn it up?
Yeah, it just actually stopped. I don't know why it does that. Try going off the slide.
Artificial intelligence is being used.
Oh, this video doesn't want to load. I'll skip through it. Basically, they talk about how we've used them to retime their signal lights, and we've reduced near miss accidents and accidents by 40%. Apologies for the slide difficulty. To dive into how it works, technically speaking, we're streaming these data feeds into our cloud. All we need is an IP address. We can get set up as in a little as 24 hours once we get an IP address. We then process that using AI, computer vision, turn that into a data set, and we serve it back to the customer via a dashboard and an API, as well as alerts if they like, such as email or text alerts if they so choose. This slide's just to highlight the fact that our product currently drives value and ROI where we can drive revenue, but over time it becomes more and more valuable. And there's multiple ways to monetize this data set, not just with the customers themselves. You can imagine a data set that shows how well traffic moves through a city or boats move through a port, how valuable that would be to other potential customers, such as autonomous vehicle companies, as well as actually insurance companies are super interested in this data set. Where they can have a data set understanding which intersections are dangerous, how dangerous is the commute of someone that they're giving auto insurance to, et cetera. So a lot of value in the future. We tend not to talk about that, but it's kind of an important like long-term part of our roadmap. One of our current use cases is at the Dallas-Fort Worth Airport, one of the largest airports in the world. We're both on the air side and the dock side. We're analyzing curb use for them, traffic patterns. Actually, parking is one thing they're interested in. We're reducing emissions, sending alerts and notifications, and then the air side, managing their fleet vehicles and cargo visibility. We're also at the Port Authority of New York, New Jersey at their port, doing similar things on their port, managing their fleet vehicles, optimizing container movement, and sending notifications when ships arrive. Over time, we hope to like help ports in particular drive optimal docking utilization, which is like a major revenue driver for them. So we'll be able to, justify a high price just by our revenue optimization for these ports. We have, as I mentioned in the beginning, we have 9 paying customers, some very important logos, and 3 state whitelists. Our revenue went from 86K in 2023 to 500 last year, and on track for a few million this year. It's our pipeline. Basically, to get to the 2 to 3 million this year, about half of them is new business and half of that is expansion of existing customers. In particular, I'd highlight if you look at the 500K for the Port Authority, that's a very important contract for us. That'd be our 3rd contract with us. Getting to that $500 to $1 million kind of contract size is when we really get profitable, and it's a sign that we're driving actual ROI for these customers. Government customers tend to operate on this kind of crawl, walk, run model. Right now, we're essentially have a 200K contract with them where we're walking, and our next one will be running, and kind of a full justification of our go-to-market plan. Kind of our unit economics. We basically charge about $5,000 per sensor. So for example, at the Port Authority, we're in about 35 sensors and we're charging them $200K per year. Our cost is just below that, and over time we'll go down to about $1,000 per month. So we'll become more profitable over the next year as we optimize essentially how much data we have to process for each sensor feed. I can share this data with anyone who's interested later on, but that's the general kind of yearly SaaS model that we operate under. There's one of the great things about the company was the timing for us. When we kind of started the company 3 or 4 years ago, there was maybe about 5 to 10 opportunities put out for bid that directly required hardware agnostic AI software. And then last year it was something like 50, and this year it's looking like it's going to be 150. So we're timed well. Essentially all of these operators and local government entities are realizing they need to justify their projects and what they're doing in a data-driven manner. They can no longer just request $1 million to make traffic better. So they need a solution where they can quickly go from a situation where they don't have data to having data. And our solution is pretty much the only one on the market where they can quickly and cheaply do that. Fly through this slide. This is the TAM. These are the people we're competing with, these large engineering companies. We will eventually partner with them, and they obviously, as we continue to take business with them, represent a likely exit scenario for us. It's kind of the J curve of companies that kind of dig in and do AI for government. You kind of have to get through, and then the revenue and the customer traction is so sticky once you earn the revenue that it tends to be a very nice outcome over a fairly short period of time. Team, Nick DeAndre is the founder. He came from Apple. He actually originally wanted to build an iPhone for intersections to do this with hardware, but when he talked to the customers, they said we already have a ton of cameras. We just need some software. So that's how we settled on building this. I come from several startups. My last company was Seal Nanotechnologies. I've raised over $1 billion in my career. Eric's our engineer. He comes from Nauto, which basically does computer vision for autos like Mercedes-Benz. Here's kind of like there's a lot of words on this page, and I'll fly through it because I'm kind of at time, but over the next 12 months, our key goals are to renew our deployments at Port Authority in Dallas, Fort Worth, and Orlando, and finish out this round, and then get ourselves set up for Series A by the end of the year. Lastly, the round dynamics. As I mentioned, we've moved up the round to about $3.3 million. We've closed 2.4 to date. We have another 500K committed. So we're looking to close out the last 500K in this round. It's a $9.2 million pre-money valuation. It's led and underwritten by 8VC. Alex Moore is the partner at 8VC. He's on our board. He's also on the board of Palantir. And obviously there's a lot of crossover and similarities between our company and Palantir. That's it. I will pause for Q&A.
Great. Thanks, Mike. Great presentation. For those in the audience, you're welcome to put questions in the chat box. We have with us today Angela Lee of 37 Ventures. Angela, you're welcome to join us whenever you are available. Mike, my first question is, you mentioned several projects up there. What exactly is their definition of success? What do they need to see in order to continue going?
Yeah. So it tends to vary by use case, but it's essentially working with the kind of the champion of it's like enterprise sales. You have to establish the use case and then justify that you achieved it. In the case of Port Authority, for example, they set some key characteristics of success such that they'd be able to track all the cameras would be up and running. They'd have a stable data set that is independently verified as having 95% plus accuracy, and that they wanted a few features such as real-time alerts when certain things happen, and we've achieved those. So as simple as setting goals and achieving them. I think in our third contract we'll get into more ROI of proving out how much money we're exactly saving them. For Orlando, it was more about improving the rate of their near miss accidents, which we've already done. So it's something they're going to want to continue to do. They're essentially saving lives already with our software. So it tends to be use case to use case, but it is, it's either establishing goals and hitting them or proving out an ROI. And as the contracts get bigger, it's definitely more about ROI.
Great. Angela, thanks for joining today. Welcome from 37 Angels. We'll do a longer introduction in a few moments, but did you have a question at this point?
On Grid Matrix, I did not.
Okay, we'll come back to you here in a few moments. Mike, it seems like you're gathering a lot of data there. Is there a data play here, and what does that look like?
Yeah, I think I mentioned on one of the slides. It's absolutely a data play. We're building a data set, which, by the way, we own, and contractually we have the right to the data that we produce. But we're building a data set that shows how objects move through cities and ports, and it hasn't been built to date. So you can imagine, like right now, when you design an intersection, you have a civil engineering firm who, admittedly, has been doing this for 50 years, but they essentially, with some data, say, okay, you should put the bike lane here, and you should have 2 left turn lanes if you have this much traffic expectation. But we're building a data set that says, for any given set of traffic or objects moving through your infrastructure, here's how all of these different setups and parameters work, and how well they convert into safety and congestion. So we actually are building the data set that civil engineering companies can use to actually optimally build these things. So it's valuable right there. And then on top of that, autonomous vehicle companies and anyone who's trying to design things that can safely move automatically through these infrastructures, like, very much are desiring this data set.
That's great. So are you planning to build any AI tools that you can actually sell with the data set in the future, or where do you think it might go?
Yeah. We talk about putting an LLM on top so that those questions at the beginning you can answer. You say, how often are people idling at my curve, and the AI can tell you. But that's just like a benefit of, like, the modern, like, AI like approach. It means that if you have a data set, it's a lot more accessible and essentially customer friendly. So definitely something we'll add on. We don't even necessarily have to build it. The tools are already out there and very cheap, as everyone knows what's going on in the kind of the LLM space.
Great. And my final question is, what's your sales pipeline look like in the next 6 months? What do you think might be coming in?
Yeah, so it's like like a couple of we have for most of these are like very chunky contracts. So we basically have like 10 to 15 that, if we got all of them, would be $6 or $7 million. Our hit rate so far has been about 40%, so that would get us above our 3 million. And then we have our expansions on our existing, which are a lot more high probability. So we think 3 million is very comfortable for 2025.
Great. Thanks for a great presentation, Mike. For those in the audience, there's a poll on the screen. Please fill that out if you can. For those in the panel, don't close out the poll. With that, we'll move to our next presenter. We have with us next up is Chris Bishop of Fintegrate. Go ahead and launch your slides when you're ready, Chris, and kick off when you're able.
All right. Can you guys see the screen?
Yes, we can.
All right. Thank you. My name is Chris Bishop, CEO of Fintegrate Technology. We are a fintech company that's focused on automation and integration in the areas of collections and recovery and dispute management, fraud for dispute management, as well as merger and acquisition data conversions. So the problem we have today is in the financial space. Believe it or not, a lot of these banks and credit unions are using 20-year-old software technology to track collections and recovery for delinquent accounts and loans, as well as spreadsheets for dispute management. So a lot of them are manual processes, even to track this and enter data into the systems and report on it to the Fed. So our goal has always been to automate that process. We've got 20 years experience in integration and automation in the fintech space, and we want to automate this completely through the use of some AI technologies, as well as our machine learning we have today. We essentially have 3 products in the market space. One, Fusion CRS, is the software we acquired in 2021 from Charlotte, North Carolina, that had about 20 customers on the system that does collections and recovery. And we added our deep core integration to that, updated the technology stack, added things, click to pay, bill pay, that type of things to make that more user friendly. In doing so, we created the automation engine for disputes and for fraud for Fusion DMS. And that handles dispute tracking for credit card, debit card fraud, check fraud from intake all the way through resolution reporting to keep the banks and credit unions in compliance, and try to try to get them their fines and that type of thing lowered. Fusion LRS is kind of the third generation product that we've had from two previous companies that have built and sold in the last 20 years for data conversions for merger and acquisitions. So if a bank is going through an M&A, there's two separate systems. We take the data out of their old system, the check images, the document images, the reports, the statements, signature cards, and we migrate that over to our browser or to their new go forward system. So all three of these are a integration, automation play and product that saves a tremendous amount of time and process at the bank level. Our real goal is by the next 3 to 4 years to have this whole process for collections and recovery, for dispute management, for delinquent accounts and communications and reporting to the feds to be an automated process, and to use to upgrade our machine learning and some of the tools we have today to a real agentic AI type process. Again, we've got 25 years in the industry for bank data access and integration.
You're breaking up there, Chris.
Okay, is that better?
Yeah, let's try that.
We've got 25 years in the industry for data access and integration. Our real sweet spot in the marketplace is about the 5,500 banks in the 10 billion and below space. We have customers today that are 400 billion or 200 billion, excuse me, all the way down to $100 million credit unions. But our real sweet spot is going to be in that 10 billion to $200 million range, of which, again, there's about 5,500 banks and credit unions in that space. Some of our current customers we have today, on the left-hand side, you see Eastman Kodak, Advantis, Northern Trust. In the center, kind of, that's probably a little bit outdated. We're up to about 100 customers today running all three products. And the ones on the right-hand side are companies that I've either sold companies to before, or that are referring our products and services today. Those are the largest core companies and financial service companies in the U.S. today. Again, many of which we have long-term contracts with to do resell or refer our products. What's interesting on this slide is our competition. So for the Fusion CRS, the Temenos products is probably, all of those with the exception of Akuvo are very old, 18-year-old, 20-year-old products that don't have a lot of technology built into them, a lot of new technologies that are owned by big companies, and they just haven't put a lot of the technologies into them. The core processors as a competitor have a module in their core. It's not a complete collection recovery system. So we get a lot of business from the core processors you saw on the previous page because their module doesn't compete with the actual collection system. For the Fusion DMS product, what's interesting there is the two competitors at the top. One of them's at the very top end of the market, serving the largest 30 banks in the country. The other one's at the very low end of the market. So, we got a multi-million-dollar price tag on one and a couple $100 on the other one. And we fit that sweet spot for community banks and credit unions right in the center. So we're not going to be the low-cost leader, but we're not going to be the top 50 banks in the country either. And then the last one for the data conversion and access and integration, really the last 20 years has got us here. Those two companies are the companies that I had sold previously to Jack Henry and to Connected for data access and integration. So we kind of know their playbook. We know everything there is to know because we taught them all. And a lot of those employees have come back to work for us now at this company, including Jason Alfano, who's our CTO. Been with me the last two successful startups that we've done. Jeff Harper, in his own right, has had a couple of successful exits in fintech space, and then Terry Nelson, who is our acting president, is who we purchased Fusion CRS from in 2021. So, we've all been together in this industry for a very long time. A lot of our staff, developers, implementation have worked with us in the past and now work with us at this company. So the management team and the employees invested about $1 million up front. We raised 2.2 in the beginning with just friends and family to do the acquisition. Here is some of a little bit about the conversions or the business I've sold before. Again, 4 previous exits in my career, and then Fusion CR or Fintegrate is where we are today. So, and it is worth noting that the 4 previous companies were bootstrapped, much like this one, with minimal capital put in from management. Here's our historical numbers. We've grown revenue, almost doubled revenue every year since I bought the company. We reinvested a lot of money back in the people and the products. It's worth noting that probably almost $700,000 of the EBITDA in 2024 and previous years went towards payments for the original company. So we're basically break even at that point. We're investing heavily in new sales staff, marketing, and towards the end of this year, some API or AI initiatives in 2025. We need to gain the logos of the banks and credit unions this year, and then continue to build out on our strategy. So we believe that we'll be back into profitability very quickly. So what we're offering now, the $12 million valuation, 20% discount post-money. As you see, the terms 3 years at 7%. So there's a $100,000 minimum investment. I think that is somewhat negotiable there. It's a convertible note. The money's going to be used again for sales and marketing and additional business or development, sales development, business development staff and sales. And then towards the end of 2025, our roadmap is to really pour into the AI space to more automate our products that we have today. We've got several scenarios. A very large software aggregator could come in and acquire our business because none of the core products you saw on the previous page has a collection and recovery system, nor do they have a dispute management system. Our competitors, again, the very big guy and the very small guy, or in the collection space, they had several competitors there. That's always an option for them to roll up our market space and clients, as well as some just adjacent software providers, right? Guys that have other products that sell to the same space in this industry. We've actually had a couple of offers kind of early on and talked to a couple of our competitors and a couple of private equity groups already. We just don't think it's the right time to make that move. So a core processor is probably somewhat interesting, but all of those are multi-billion-dollar companies. Not sure if we're big enough to move their needle right now, but if we get to $5, $6, $10 million in revenue, then certainly we would get their attention. And then of course private equity, who we've sold to in the past. Our kind of the terms there. What we're seeing is recapping the company. I guess what this is: 94, probably close to 100 customers today on all 3 products. We've had 4 previous exits successfully. A very large addressable market of 5,500 banks and credit unions, in which we're very well known from our previous companies. We like to feel like we've had a good product, and if there is a product fit, we can get an audience with the bank or the credit union. Again, we've invested a little bit over $1 million. For the total invested to date, it's about 3.2. We did just get pitched at the Baylor Angel Network and got about $500,000, I think, soft circled from there last week. So we were very excited about that. And then the fintech M&A, banks continue to merge at a higher rate this year through M&A. So we plan on growing the LRS product through the M&A and do that data conversion. I'll now open it up for questions.
Great, Chris. Great presentation. Thanks for that. Angela, what's your question?
Yeah, I'm curious, when you are reaching out to financial institutions, who is your best kind of wedge in terms of your main customer? And then what's if they're maybe recommending Fintegrate to another colleague of theirs, you'd be like, you really need to use Fintegrate because they help me solve what?
So what we do is we help them solve their compliance and their automation problems within fraud dispute, and collections and recovery. So it's a financial play on that side because we can increase the collection amount, we can decrease delinquencies on their outstanding loans or NSFs or any type of accounts like that. And then with the fraud play, I mean, the average is $25 to $35 per fraud dispute. So if you dispute a credit card claim, it's a minimum of $35 for them to process that. What we do is we preempt that need and say, with our system, it's a fraud dispute CRM. They don't have to pass it over to Visa and hit those charges. Today, they're just writing off that $35 charge, giving you the credit back to your account and moving on, because it's cost them more than $35 to process that dispute, whether it's valid or not. They just write it off. So we interject upstream from there, automate the process, and say this is or is not a valid fraud, right? And let them decide that, and then they can decide whether to move it on to Visa or to not to write it off. And we also process the posting of the provisional credits to your account and reversing them out, all the letters and notices and emails that need to go out to the end user.
Thank you.
Sure.
Great. So, Chris, what's the sales cycle on this from the time you have the first call to the time it's installed? How long is that?
So with banks and credit unions, it's a little bit different. Credit unions, it probably takes 9 months, sometimes to 10 or 12 months for the collection and recovery product because of just the way they buy. Banks are a little different. Theirs is probably 6 months. For the fraud dispute process, that's more like a 90-day to maybe 120 in either case sales cycle. And then for the data conversion, the Fusion LRS product, that's typically a 30 to 60-day sales cycle. So we've got a short, a medium, and a long-term sales cycle. And the reason that the other one is so short is they announced the merger, there's a cutover date, and the Fed gives them approval. So we know the compelling event and the date from day one.
Right. So, what's your CAC LTV ratio if you had to average it out? Which this is a broad range there, I'm sure.
I'm sorry, ask that again.
What's your customer acquisition to lifetime value ratio there? You have 3 different cycles, so that it may be a hard question to answer.
It is hard, and I'll be honest with you. We bought the company in 2021 with the Fusion CRS. We added Fusion DMS 18 months ago. So we've had great success with that. Probably 35 contracts signed today. 20 of them are probably installed right now. And then we've got about 40 on the data conversion M&A piece, which is what we've always been known for. So we've now building this metrics into HubSpot so we can track it and come up with some real some better numbers and metrics. So I'd hate to give you something right now that wouldn't be accurate.
Okay. My last question is about your exit strategy. It seemed like you've already figured out who you're going to sell to. Can you tell us more about that group?
I wish I had figured it out, but it's going to be someone that's in fintech or a private equity that has a portfolio of companies in fintech, right? That understands disputes and frauds potentially, or that just understands the software market space. Again, we're not going to be selling, I don't think, to one of the multi-billion-dollar core companies, although we have twice before in the past. So you never really know. But what we're looking to do is sell to a strategic buyer, probably that can help us continue to grow the business into that space because there's such a greenfield in dispute management and fraud. Fraud's going up 70-80% per year, and delinquencies by that same nature is too. And because there's not a lot of dispute systems in the market, you saw 2 competitors in all of the dispute market, right? The very high end and the very low end. There's a lot of greenfield in that we want to capitalize on immediately.
That's great. We're at the end of our time. Thanks so much for a great presentation. For those in the audience, if you can vote on the poll, that'd be great. And with that, let's bring up Angela Lee of 37 Angels. Have a great presentation here called Lessons Learned from 20,000 Startup Pitches. Tell us more about that, Angela. Sound like a cool presentation. How did you come to it?
Yeah, so by way of introduction, my name is Angela Lee. I'm the founder of 37 Angels. We are an angel network in New York City. Every year we look at about 2,000 companies and invest in 10, and we've been doing this for over a decade. So we've seen well over 20,000 pitches, and I've personally been investing since 2008. I'm also a venture partner in a couple of funds. At 37 Angels, we're invested in 115 companies. At one fund that I'm a venture partner in, we're invested in 40. And then another fund that I manage, we're invested in 70 companies. And so I thought I would share some of the great things that we see and what investors look for when pitching, but then also share maybe some of the pitfalls we see in fundraising. And would love for folks to ask questions. And when I'm not at 37 Angels, my day job is I'm a professor at Columbia Business School, where I mostly teach venture capital. Any other questions, or should I dive in?
Let's go and dive in. It sounds like you got a great presentation. What led you to build this presentation?
Yeah, I think, we talk to so many founders every year, and we do see a lot of the same mistakes being made. And so I thought it would be helpful to say, if you're a founder, here are some of the common things that investors look for or don't look for. And if you're an investor, here's a lens that you can use to think about what makes sense when you are looking at all of these companies.
Cool.
Okay, so I will dive in. So again, wear 2 hats, founder of 37 Angels and professor at Columbia Business School. And I thought I would start with kind of our 4P framework. So in terms of what we look for when we are looking for early stage companies, we're looking at people, problem, progress, and price. And I just want to go through each of these 4Ps. And again, if folks have questions, please do ask. I would love this to be as interactive as possible. So from a people perspective, the biggest thing that we really look for is domain expertise. And I see a lot of pitch deck slides that look like this, where it is three bright people where they have, good experience and they're obviously very professionally accomplished, but it doesn't really tell me why they're the right people to start this company. And so I think Fintegrate just did a really good job. Like if you look, remember they had like bullet points under each of their team members that said, this is our deep fintech experience. And I trust that they deeply understand the problem that they're solving. The founder's job is to really say, this is why we are the right person to be solving this problem. Now, I will say that domain expertise is more important for a B2B company than a B2C company. And the reason why is because when it's a B2B company, oftentimes it's founder-led sales in the beginning. And the more the founder understands the customer, the more the founder understands the problem they're solving for that customer, the more authentically they can sell. With B2C, domain expertise is important, but it is easier to get that through, customer interviews. Also, all of us are consumers, and so that's a little bit easier to get there. I see a nice, I think that note is just to have some panelists. Okay, so I'm trying to think in terms of other things around people that are interesting. Serial entrepreneur. So I would say that a third to a half the decks that I see, the founder will somewhere on their deck say, serial entrepreneur. And again, I would say a third to a half of the pitch decks I see, the founder says that. As an investor, we have to kind of double click on that and ask for some numbers. The best number is we sold for $100 million, or we, got IPO'd for, $5 billion. Short of that, if you don't have successful exit where you can talk how big the exit was, you can say I returned 8x to my investors. We got to 100 million in revenue. We got to 200 employees. We raised $50 million in venture capital funding. All of those are good metrics to show me, the investor, that you made some degree of progress with a measurable kind of outcome tied to it. In my experience, when the founder is kind of unable to share any specifics, what that means is they had a previous startup, it wasn't particularly successful. One unsuccessful startup is neutral. Statistically, you're just as likely to be successful if you're a first-time founder or a one-time unsuccessful founder. If you've failed at a startup a couple of times, then we start to get a little bit worried. And so just don't put serial entrepreneur unless you're really prepared to back up that bullet point, because we are going to ask what that means. On the problem side, we are looking for a large market. And so I'm assuming a lot of the folks who are on this call have heard these terms TAM, SAM, and SOM, which is like, how big of a market are you playing in? And these things are important, but I find that people define TAM, SAM, and SOM very differently. People start to get really fussed about like all the math around sizing a market, and they spend all this time. I would say, like, yes, this matters. You have to have these slides in your pitch deck. But to me, this is really the question we're trying to ask you. Can you get to $1 billion exit? Now, this is a VC specific question. Angels can get away with a smaller market. And so I do want to differentiate between the two. So where did I come up with $1 billion? The reason why I came up with $1 billion is because the average venture capital fund in the US is about $120 million. The median VC fund in the US is between $40 and $50 million. So just to get to a nice round number, just assume that the average VC fund is $100 million. On average, VCs own 10% of a startup at exit. So in order for them to return the fund, meaning return the $100 million fund, every single company they invest in, they have to believe can get to $1 billion exit, so that when it exits for $1 billion, they get a $100 million check back to potentially return the fund. And so as a founder, there are a few different ways you can do this. You can get to $1 billion in revenue and then get acquired for 1x revenue, or you can make 200 million in revenue, get acquired at 5x, or make 100 million in revenue and get acquired at 10x, which is probably only possible these days if you're in a really, really hot sector. Now, if these numbers seem really big, then as a founder, what this means is you should not be targeting the average size VC fund. So maybe you target a smaller fund, you go after a $25 million fund or a $10 million fund. There are plenty. Or you know that you are likely going to have to mostly fundraise through angels. Angels can get away with much smaller multiples because we don't have fund economics to worry about. And when we might be very happy with $100 million or $250 million exit. That said, if you can't get to minimally $100 million exit, I would also say you probably shouldn't be fundraising at all. And you should be thinking about alternate ways of fundraising through, grants or debt, small business loans. There are lots of different ways to go about that. Factoring, revenue-based financing. There are so many other ways to finance a company that is not angel versus VC. And I know this can be a difficult slide to accept, but I do think it's important that founders don't waste their time going after VC funding. And the thing about angel funding is, as a founder, even if you're only pitching angels right now, you have to think about VCs at some point, because most startups, to be successful, are going to eventually need to raise from VCs. So this is something to think about. The other thing on the problem side is you want to really understand the customer. So what are the customer demographics that you are going after? So we will ask the founder, who is your customer? And we want you to describe the demographics of the customer. So age, income level, education level, gender. Psychographics are what some of you might call like a customer persona. So for example, you know that your, sometimes you'll see this as like one customer archetype would be like an empty nester. So let's say you're selling into parents. An empty nester parent is a very different parent than a first-time parent who has like 2 kids under the age of 5, right? So if you just have parents as your customer, that's not very specific. But again, this is an empty nester versus this is like a first-time parent. Like they're very different things that they're reading, very different pain points that you're solving for them, which is the final thing, right? So what is the pain point you're solving for them? Some of you maybe have heard me speak before about like green juices, right? Green juices are this huge market. We've been pitched a lot of them, certainly. What's the pain point you're solving for the customer? Are you solving the pain point of convenience, which is I'm trying to get 5 fruits and vegetables, or 5 just like healthy servings of, fiber-rich foods into my body each day? In which case, now my competitors are things like mush bowls, chia seed pudding. Like there are lots of these other things that that are my indirect competitors. Or is my pain point that you're solving for me weight loss? In which case, my indirect competitors are now Slim Fast and, Atkins bars and all these different things. And so really understanding the problem you're solving for customers, the pain point you're solving for customers, allows you to A, really define who your customer is better, B, find where your customers are, and C, really articulate the indirect competitive landscape. Another big mistake we see founders make is they really only focus on their direct competitors. This is what we do, and here are the 4 other companies who do exactly what we do. And it's really important to be broad and exhaustive about your competitive landscape, especially including your indirect competitors. I'm not seeing any questions come in, so I will keep going, but if folks have any, feel free to put them into the chat. From a progress perspective, a question I get asked on a daily basis is, how much, traction do I have to have before I can pitch an angel or a VC? So most of you have probably seen a slide that maybe looks like this in terms of like the stages of a company. As the company has more progress, they can raise more money. So typically the first money in is going to be the founder's own capital. It might be 10, 20, 50, $100,000, either from savings or on a credit card. It is not necessary, right? Founders do not need to put their own capital into the startup. In fact, if you have an investor who says, I want you to have skin in the game, I need you to put your own money in, I would frankly walk away, right? Because not everybody has that kind of capital to put in. It is not necessary. It's common. If it's easy for you to put a little bit of your own money in, great, but again, not necessary. Then you have the friends and family round, often called friends, family, and fools. These are people who know the founder personally. A very normal friends and family round might be raising anywhere from like $100,000 to maybe $500,000. These are individuals who can write $10,000, $20,000, $30,000 checks. Again, not necessary. Not everybody has friends and family who can write them $10,000, $20,000, and $30,000 checks. I would say less than 20% of the founders that pitch us have a friends and family round. So not at all the majority of founders have this. Then your first kind of professional outside round of funding is the pre-seed round. A very normal pre-seed or seed round might be 1 to 3 VCs and then like 5 to 10 angels. So that's a pretty normal pre-seed round or a normal seed round. These days, I would say a pre-seed round is raising anywhere from like $500,000 to 1.5, maybe 2 million if we're in the Bay Area. A seed round, I would say, is raising anywhere from 1 to 5 million on a valuation of probably these days anywhere from like $8 to $20 million. Again, very dependent on where you are in the world. In the Bay Area, seed rounds are probably raising, 2 to 5 million on a valuation of like 12 to 20 million. In New York, it might be raising 1 to 4 million on a valuation of maybe like 10 to 20. But if you're in a smaller city, a seed round could be raising up to a couple million, and valuations might get capped at like 15. So it really depends on where you are in the world. For seed stage companies, the vast majority of seed stage companies have revenue. So the average seed stage company is 2 to 3 years old, meaning they have revenue, they have traction. Pre-seed companies can be pre-revenue or post-revenue, although I will say, we are mostly seed investors, although we do plenty of pre-seed, and we see a lot of pre-seed companies that have, a couple $100,000 in revenue. So the stages have gotten later, and so the bar to raise these rounds is pretty high. A Series A round, people used to say you could raise a Series A once you have $1 million of annual revenue. These days, I would say it's more like $3 to $5 million of annual revenue before you can raise a Series A. Again, we are seed stage investors. We see plenty of seed stage companies pitching us that have multi-million dollars of revenue, and they're still raising a seed round. They're not raising their Series A yet. So that is one definition of progress, which is just simply like how much revenue do you have? So again, in summary, pre-seed can be pre-revenue or post-revenue. Seed stage, almost always post-revenue. And then a Series A, minimally $1 million of annual revenue, if not more.
I have a question, Angela. How do you view bridge rounds? You think those are handy? Do you invest in those, not invest in those? What's your view of it?
Yeah, so a bridge round is, I'm a founder. I raised, $1 million pre-seed round 18 months ago. And my expectation is I would raise a seed round 18 months later, because typically every 18 months is when people raise rounds. And you're like, okay, I was planning to raise a $3 million seed round 18 months later. 18 months later, maybe it's 2023, and it's kind of one of the worst times to fundraise in the last decade. And you're like, oof, I don't want to raise right now at a lower valuation, so I'm going to do what's called a seed extension or a bridge to my Series A. So I was going to raise a $3 million seed round, but instead I'm going to raise a $400,000 pre-seed extension or bridge to my seed round. You can call them either thing. I've heard them called all sorts of funny names. This is a yellow flag for investors, because what it tells investors is that you were intending to raise your next round, something went a little bit awry, and now you're raising an extension. The data also shows that people who raise extension rounds do perform worse. They're less likely to be successful in the future. We absolutely look at extension rounds, and we funded plenty of extension rounds. We're just going to look at that like it's a brand new round. And Hall, I know you're going to talk about cap tables in a bit. Just make sure that the founder's not being overly diluted. We are seeing a ton of extension rounds right now, given the state of the market. And so we're just making sure that founders aren't over diluting themselves before they get to their seed round Series A.
Great.
There's a question here. Any suggestions for life science companies who want to show company progress, but will never get to that revenue? So it's really important to know what appropriate progress looks like for your industry. So what I just described is, I would argue, the common milestones for the types of industries that most angels and VCs are investing in. So software, consumer tech, anything that doesn't have really high startup timelines and really high capital costs. And categories like that, I would put life science, biotech, clean energy, robotics. So these are things that either need a lot of approval to go to market, which life sciences often does, or things that just requires billions and billions of dollars of investment before you have any idea if things are going to work. For those industries are going to have their own milestones. As a founder, it's really important to not pitch a software investor if you're pitching a biotech or life sciences startup, because you will be wasting both of your time. It is important, if you are in an industry like that, to only pitch investors who invest in that space. For pre-seed, do you look for validated product market fit? So validated is an interesting word, as is product market fit. So I think for pre-seed, you need to have an instinct on what your product market fit is going to be. I think validated is too hard. Maybe the next couple of slides are going to maybe give you some initial indications. So I would say for both, so for what I'm about to show you, the next two slides, definitely true for seed stage. I think for pre-seed is a maybe, but by seed stage, you should definitely be able to create a slide that looks like the next slide I'm going to show you, which is, hey, I'm a founder and I have repeatable progress. I know how to acquire customers. So I tried a bunch, actually, I'm going to skip over this example. Let's do this example. So I tried a bunch of different customer acquisition channels. I tried direct mail. I tried, influencer blogs. I tried search engine optimization. The marketing channel that works the best for me is direct email. And I know that when I email this many people, this many click, this many open, I get this many customers. As a founder, you can now calculate, I would argue, one of the most important ratios, which is your LTV to CAC ratio. Your LTV is your customer lifetime value. Your CAC is your customer acquisition cost. So in this case, your customer acquisition cost is what was the cost of the email list? What was the cost of the email copywriter? How much did you have to pay MailChimp to deliver the emails, all that kind of stuff. And I know, okay, let's say each of these customers cost me $7 to acquire. That is my customer acquisition cost. Well, then your LTV has to minimally be 3 times that. So your customer lifetime value has to be at least $21. And you've run some experiments. Does it work better to have the subject line be A or subject line be B? Is it better to have a green box in the email or a yellow box in the email? What customer demographic is best to email to get the higher response rate? And then do you understand your customer? So like, let's say you're looking at a direct-to-consumer product. How often are customers repurchasing? How often are customers returning? Who's buying it? Am I buying this for myself or am I buying this as a gift? What's the return rate? All those different things. So for seed stage, you should absolutely be able to answer this question, which is one indication of product market fit, which is that you know how to acquire customers, you know the problem you're solving for them, you've run some experiments. I would say for pre-seed, half the pre-seed companies I look at also are able to make this slide. And I feel like with every day, what is expected or pre-seed is getting higher and higher, especially with the advent of AI. I do think that it is cheaper to do these things now than it was even 2 years ago. On the B2B side, you might be trying direct email, referrals, speaking at conferences, also SEO. Usually for early stage companies, cold calling is what we're seeing people do. So in this case, how many cold calls can a salesperson do in a month? How many demos, how many meetings? If they get one client, then the customer acquisition cost is the salesperson's salary. So if you're going to pay that salesperson $5,000 a month, then your LTV better be at least $15,000. Now for B2B, investors recognize that B2B takes longer to scale than B2C does. And so I think that sometimes even by seed stage, you don't know your LTV yet for B2B, because if you have a multi-year contract, you might not know yet how long it is before people churn off. Okay. There's a question here, which is how do angels and seed investors look at SBIR grants? We have raised this much non-dilutive. Okay, so non-dilutive funding is funding where you don't have to give up any equity. It can come in the form of often grants. I think right now, anything in the space of healthcare that's requiring grants, we are obviously going to be looking at, do those grants still exist, given everything happening, at the federal government level. So I would say like 6 months ago, I would have said non-dilutive grants are great because that allows you to get capital without having to give up any equity. I think right now we're going to basically look very carefully, like, do you need those grants to keep coming in and do those grants still exist? The other thing is sometimes I find that people treat non-dilutive funding as like a gift because it feels like free money because you haven't given away equity for it. And so we are also looking for capital efficiency, that you've taken in, $3 million, but that you've spent that thoughtfully. And that you've gotten good results based off that. Maybe it's around efficacy, maybe it's around FDA approval in your case, whatever the case may be. So at a high level, grants are viewed positively because it means that somebody looked at you and said, yes, we want to give you grants. But with a couple of caveats that I mentioned. Okay, So I'm going to keep going. For those of you who want to read more about customer acquisition, this is a really great book. It's called Traction by Gabriel Weinberg. They talk about the 19 different customer acquisition channels you can use to acquire customers. It's a really great book for founders to read to say, I don't know how to do, content marketing. And it'll walk you through. As an investor, it's a really great book to read to say, like, what are the metrics that matter within content marketing? And again, the book is Traction by Gabriel Weinberg. And then this is a really good article by Andreessen Horowitz about 16 startup metrics that you should look for when you are investing in terms of what matters. There's a question at pre-seed stage, a startup might not have enough data to come up with a good LTV to CAC ratio. What's your suggestion for such a scenario? So I would say for B2C, you should be able to come up with an LTV CAC ratio within your first month of having customers. And that's because, whether it's Instagram ads and you should know what you're paying like for per impression of ad, or whether it's direct email, or whether it is, Google search ads, whatever it is. For B2C, I do think the bar is a little bit harder. Even for pre-seed, there is an expectation of LTV to CAC ratio. If you truly don't have that, then what I would say is here are the 3 ways that we acquired customers. We acquired, 1,000 customers through Instagram. Our founder has, 1 million TikTok followers, and we have a waiting list of whatever. And we like, and you would at least start to quantify how you're acquiring customers. And then for a customer lifetime value, I would I would try to logically come up with some assumptions. So you could say, look, we think that X% of people are going to buy this many products over 6 years. But again, I do think that even with pre-seed, it is better to come with a little bit of traction. And again, like a waiting list can be traction, even if you're pre-revenue, but you can say, look, we have 500 people on our waiting list who want to buy our product. To get to those 500 people on our waiting list, we email 10,000 people. And so you start to have a sense of conversion rate. Okay, the final thing is price. So these are the things that kind of lead to a higher or lower price. So if you are a successful serial entrepreneur, you are going to raise at anywhere from like 1.5x to 3x of a higher valuation than a first-time founder. If you have a business model that has high switching costs, recurring revenue, and network effects, you are going to have a higher valuation. If you are in a sector that has higher multiples, like AI, like fintech, enterprise software, you're going to have a higher valuation. Pace of growth, if you're growing faster, you're going to have a higher valuation. Market dynamics, if you're raising in 2021 versus 2025, you're going to have a higher valuation simply because we were in a more founder-friendly market there. And then geography. The more capital an ecosystem has, the higher valuations. So the Bay Area has the most capital, they're going to have the highest valuations, then New York, then I would say like Boston, Austin, Chicago, LA would probably be next, and then smaller cities below that. If you Google revenue multiples by sector, one of the first, second, or third links will be an NYU professor. Actually, I'll share these links with people. So this is one that I will share with everyone. And then this is one that I will also share with everyone. So these are really good resources where they will actually say, here is what revenue multiples are in your particular sector. They're not exactly the same, but you can see they're pretty close on top of each other. One thing that's difficult, though, is it's sometimes very hard to figure out what sector you're in. So all of these, I would argue, are healthcare. But you can see that like biotech and pharma have a very different multiple than support services or facilities. And so sometimes it can be a little bit of a tussle between the investor and the founder to say, well, what sector are you really in? For those of you who like data, I would strongly encourage you to subscribe to PitchBook or Crunchbase. They both do quarterly states of the market. So these are reports that I read every single quarter on the state of the market, either US or globally. And they're really good ways to be like, what is the average seed stage startup valued at right now? What is the average Series A startup valued at right now? How does that differ by geography, and how does that differ by sector? I find that this is these are really good reports to read to just know what averages look like in the ecosystem. For those of you who wanted to learn more about the 4P framework, everything that I just said, we have it a one-pager that is at 37angels.com/download. And then the last thing is I have a list of VCs and angels. So in terms of finding VCs and angels, openvc.app, you can find VCs by sector, stage, and geography, similarly with the other couple ones. And then angel networks, you can go to kind of these umbrella organizations that will often list angel networks, or literally I would just Google angel networks in Houston, right? Angel networks in Boston, whatever the case may be. And that can be a really great way to find angels. Any other questions that folks have?
So I had a question for you more generally about AI deals coming through. We see a lot of those coming through today. When you see an AI company coming through, what questions are you thinking to get answers for before you dive into that one?
I would say the two immediate questions I have is A, what is defensible about this? I think we're seeing a lot of AI companies that are wrappers around kind of an existing LLM. And I'm like, there's just nothing proprietary or defensible about what you're building. So that's kind of think question number one. And then question number two is this the right team? I think we see a lot of people who are starting AI companies who are experts in the field that the AI is being applied to, but they actually have no AI expertise themselves. And that can be a little bit concerning if they are truly an AI company. So those are the two that immediately come to mind.
What do you think about data plays? AI works on data, generates data, and it seems like it can monetize more data. What's your take, and how often do you think that's a factor for a startup?
So your question is, what do I think about AI data plays?
Well, data plays in general. Companies selling a service, it's generating data, it's a secondary revenue stream. Is that something that impacts your valuation?
So I think that the whole I don't love. So I think there's a little bit of investor fatigue around that space, which is I think 10 years ago, there were so many pitches around like, we're going to do X and then we're going to sell the data. I think Foursquare like very famously did this, which is like, and then we'll sell all this data. And it is much harder to monetize that than I think people think. So we would look for proof of concept that people actually wanted to buy that data. And then we would just make sure that they had really good data privacy understanding to make sure that they're protecting that data. Are you only sharing kind of consolidated views, all that kind of stuff.
Great. We had a question a while back about earlier in the presentation about what progress do you look for in a life science company? Can you go over that again for the people that missed that?
Yeah, oh, and there's a question here, what progress do you look for in a biotech company?
Right.
So the first thing I'll say is I specifically don't invest in life sciences and biotech, specifically because I have no early indicator of knowing if this company is going to be successful. And secondarily, these companies take so long to go to market and exit that I will get diluted down to very little, and then the timelines will be very long. So if you look at the average venture capital funds are typically 10-year closed-end funds. And the problem with a lot of biotech and life sciences companies is it takes longer than that to exit, almost by design. And so again, you have to only reach out to biotech and life science investors, because otherwise I think you will be wasting your time if you go after a more traditional tech investor. But they are going to be looking for, early peer-backed studies to make sure that there's true efficacy there. They're also going to be looking for market size. And then I think the other thing you're going to be looking for is this like an acute problem versus a chronic problem? Because, and this is, healthcare is a weird thing, which is if you fix the customer, by definition, they leave you. And that can be a weird thing as an investor, because we obviously want the product to work. But this is also why I think a lot of people prefer to invest in chronic problems, because their customer lifetime value is longer as a result.
Great. If there are any other questions, please put it in the chat box. My final question is, I recently read an article that the new exit is secondary. secondaries. Companies are staying private so much longer. They're not going public on the NASDAQ. They're having to go and actually sell secondaries in order to give liquidity to employees and investors and so forth. What's your take on the exit strategy these days?
Yeah, so I think that secondaries are becoming very hot right now just because things are taking so long to exit, and the IPO market, the M&A market have been really tough. The problem with the secondary market, it is very hard to make the secondary market your primary goal, which is, it's funny given the words. And the reason why is because the secondary market still is less than 10% of the VC market. And so 90% of the time, you're not going to be able to sell stuff on the secondary market. And the reason why is because you have a ton of information asymmetry. I, as a seller, we have companies reaching out to us saying, one of our companies is doing really well, and we have secondary buyers saying, hey, I want to buy your shares. I have 6 years of data on this company. They have none. So there's tons of information asymmetry. The second is pricing is insane, right? So at the trough of the market, secondary discounts were like 50%. So if I had $1 million worth of private shares and I sold them to somebody in the secondary market, I'd only get $500,000. Right now, we're seeing maybe like a 10% premium, but I'm in the secondary market and I'm seeing stuff at like an 80% discount, and I'm seeing things at a 3x premium. So there's this crazy pricing arbitrage that's also really, really hard to manage. I will say, I think it's a fantastic place to be as a buyer right now because you're getting a lot of really good value. And so I think it's an interesting space. As an investor, though, you cannot depend on that as an exit path because, again, less than 10% of deals are able to exit that way. For those of you who are interested in looking, like Forge Global is a really great resource because they have a lot of data around this space. And then Equity Zen is another one. These are peer-to-peer marketplaces where people can buy and sell secondaries. But Forge Global, whether or not you actually transact, Forge Global is a really great source of data around the secondary market.
Right. There's 2 questions in the question and answer box. For B2B companies, do you contact their customers for validation?
We do. We will ask for permission first from the founder because we obviously don't want to mess up a potential sale, but we will. We will ask to contact customers for validation. And there's a questions. We are angel investors, and in many cases, would be better for us to be bought up by the VC, but it rarely happens. Do you have an opinion? Yeah. So yeah, I think that, again, what's in it for the VC to buy the angel out? They want every dollar. I would say primarily they want every dollar that they put into a company to be funding growth, mainly meaning customer acquisition. Secondarily, they want to buy out the founder, right? So this, again, is one way for VCs to compete, is to say, I'll give you a $50 million Series C. And by the way, 5 million of that is going to be used to liquidate the founders because they've been working really hard for 8 years. There's very little to incentivize them to pay out the angel. So it's rare. You're right, that angel investors will get bought up by VCs. Sometimes we want it to happen, but it's usually not our option. It is the VC's option, and it's pretty uncommon. Again, in a couple hundred deals, it's happened to us less than a handful of times.
Great. My final question is, for those investors in the audience that want to become members of 37 Angels, how do they do that?
If you go to our website, 37angels.com, we've got details there about being a member. And you can certainly learn more there. Thank you so much.
And those who want to pitch, what do they do? Go to the same website?
Yeah, I put the link into the chat if you want to go to 37angels.com
Okay, great.
/membership. And then I'll also mention we have an investment boot camp where we teach people how to be angel investors and VCs, and we offer that 4 times a year. And that link is also in the chat.
Great. Well, I want to thank you for joining us today, Angela. Great presentation again, as always, and looking forward to joining with you this fall when we have our live event in New York City, and appreciate your taking time to join us today. With that, we'll go ahead and let you go on to your next thing, and looking forward to seeing you next time.
Thanks so much.
Thanks. So for those in the audience, we're going to have one more presentation on cap tables. I had several people express interest in this topic recently and thought we'd bring it back out. And want to just go through this at a very high level. If you are interested, put in the chat box you want the slides and we'll send them to you. But we're going to talk a little bit about basics, reading cap tables, problems and challenges that you find, red flags, how to clean up cap tables, and a few other issues. But for those who are not familiar, a cap table is basically the capitalization table, which it shows ownership, who owns how much of the company and at what price. And so it just tracks the company's capital structure and shows you who's in the business. It also reflects the different rounds, A, B, C, and D of Series A of fundraisers that people did, and it consolidates all the diverse investors into one document. It also is a high-level summary of the ownership, so you see who's got what, and then it shows it can also be used to do what-if analysis. What if we raise this amount at this valuation? What would be the dilution on the current investors and founders itself? So it also includes convertible notes, options, warrants, and equity. And if you hear the word fully diluted cap table, it just means if everybody exercised their options and warrants, if all the convertible notes converted, what would the ownership look like at that point? So if we go and look, you'll see it's a really basic sheet. It just has the name or entity on there, number of shares that they own, the percentage that they own of the company, and the date the investment was actually made. For those in the audience, if you're a startup, it's best to capture all of these convertible notes, safe notes that you're using in one place and be able to match them back to the cap table. There are many tools online, such as Carta, that people use right now for the very early stage companies. You can actually get it on there for free. And that's a great way to keep it all in one place and avoid losing key information along the way. They also do the what if analysis as well. There's also new things you can do with cap tables. You can put in option pools. When you get to the Series A, it's often the case that you set aside 15% of the shares for employees. And then if you have new hires and you want to put incentive options in there, you can as well. Down the road, you may want options for or stock for advisors and those who you might want to grant warrants to for doing special things for the company. And then you also want to put in convertible notes and safe notes. So all of this is kept in one place in the cap table. So it's clear what the ownership looks like. So it's important to look at this. The key thing terms to know is that there's pre-money and post-money is how we talk about it in the startup world. Basically, if I have a pre-money of my company's worth $4 million before the investment goes in, I'm raising $1 million. Well, 4 plus 1 equals 5. The post money is 5. And if you're an investor, you get the investment divided by post money. So in this case, 4 plus 1 equals 5. 1 divided by 5, I own 20% of the company. That can also be expressed in a price per share. Just take the outstanding shares and divide it by the amount. You can get the price there as well. There's also common stock and preferred stock. And so common stock has no rights. Preferred stock has extra rights. And it's important to know which type of stock we're talking about in these cases. We often use convertible notes to do these things, and what you'll find that you get what's called convertible preferred stock that converts to common stock at some point. Participating preferred is preferred stock with a liquidation preference. You have stock options, which is the right to buy shares at a specific price. Warrants is kind of like a option. It's the right to buy stock at a specific price in the future. There's restricted stock that you use, instead of options for tax purposes. It lowers the tax burden, but it does kind of the same thing of providing incentive shares to employees. There's authorized shares, which is total authorized for present and future use, and outstanding shares, which are the total issued shares. The outstanding shares is the one that really matters. And finally, there's fully diluted shares. If you, dilute or convert all the warrants and options, you get a fully diluted shareholder. So next is cap table evaluations. It's important to look at this to make sure when you're looking at a cap table, is there enough stock that is left with the founders that they're going to be motivated to continue running the business? Sometimes we get too much dilution, and before you know it, they're going on to something else because there's no more payout for them in this business. So you have to look hard at that. And also, you have to look and see is everybody motivated to continue working?
Oh,
I've seen, yeah.
I'm sorry to interrupt. We can't see your screen or your slides.
Oh, can't see this right here. Hold on. Okay. There, is that better?
Yep, that's better.
Oh, Sorry about that. So next one is making sure that everybody that's running the business is motivated to run the business. I've seen cap tables where the founder has 95% ownership and everyone else has 0.5%. Well, down the road, those other people are not going to be motivated to continue working with it. Also, somebody once asked, what's the right split between a founder and a co-founder? And the answer I heard was anything but 50-50. At some point, you want to have someone own more to make final decisions, because we've seen companies crash and burn because one wanted to go one way, one wanted to go the other way. They couldn't agree, and so the company stalled out and then fell down. So having a 50, 50, 60, 55, 45 split is one way to solve that problem. Also, you want to avoid too many people on the cap table in the early stage that can mess it up. And so you want to think about special purpose vehicles and other tools that let people come in but not take up so many spaces on the cap table as well. There's also the crowdfunding consideration if you're running a Reg CF. In most cases, the WeFunders and the start engines, they're actually putting everything into a special purpose vehicle, and so you end up with one entity on the cap table. But it's something you might want to make clear of before you go down the path there too much, because there's only so many shareholders you can take before you're done with that. And then next slide is here. So there's two kinds of term sheets out there. There's founder-friendly term sheets and there's investor-friendly term sheets. And here's where you can look to see which way the cap table is going based on the term sheets that went into it. If the valuation skews to the higher end of the market, then it's favoring the founders. If there's no liquidation preferences, then it's for the investors, then that favors the founder. The option pool is paid for by both the founders and the investors. In a investor-friendly term sheet, the founders are paying for the options pool. There are no performance reviews nor non-compete clauses for the founders. It's a very founder-friendly term sheet. There are no dividends paid to the preferred shareholders. And the term sheet is, let's go back one. Let's see. Oops. So we'll move on to the next one here. So some of the things that people make mistakes on with cap tables is one, they have unstructured vesting. In other words, we're putting in vesting schedules that don't give enough control on the stock to keep the employee there. In many cases, they don't have any vesting at all. Sometimes there's no documentation that goes with the cap table. We can't go back and recover the original term sheets or convertible notes. And so we're trying to figure out what actually happened. Sometimes this is 5-10 years later where it's really hard to figure out. Sometimes the founders are gone at that point. So you want to make sure that all of this is pulled together in one place. So next slide. So here are the signs to look for in a cap table itself. See, we can email this to everybody that's of interest. So number one is, there's limited equity for the current team affecting their incentive. Two, there's multiple share classes. This can complicate the cap table. Three, you get liquidation preferences, ratchets, and clawbacks in very early rounds. This makes sense later stage, Series A and B and C. Doesn't make sense in the pre-seed or the early stage. There are founders who leave the company and they hold substantial amounts of equity. This is usually because there's no vesting going on. Sometimes you'll find accelerators and universities own over 5% of the equity. In later stage companies, that's quite high. And founders should fix these problems by buying out the accelerators and the universities and employees who left. There's techniques there that can help get the stock back into the business. Also, there's a lack of options pool. I've actually invested in a company that did not have an options pool. The biggest problem here is you have to compensate the employees in cash for everything. If you had just some extra options to hand out instead of cash, it really helps make the business easier to run. And then finally, you find excessive individuals on the cap table. I looked at one startup and found that they had several people on the cap table who'd done their website. Well, we don't need website developers on our cap table. We just need to pay them money to take care of what they're doing. And a few more red flags, and then we'll wrap up here in just a moment. Let's see. You need to make sure that any verbal promises actually turn into issued shares, is documented. If somebody's making a promise to do something, get it in writing and get it on the cap table and ask to see the cap table after it's done, just to make sure it gets done. And you want to keep the cap table up to date with cancellations and repurchases. Sometimes the company buys back stock. Sometimes they cancel options. Employees left early. They didn't have them all vested. Some of those stock options need to go back into the company as well. And then many startups view the cap table as a work in progress. So it's something they're going to do later, and later sometimes means never. And then before you know it, they've forgotten, it's not captured anywhere. So like I said before, there's different views of the cap table. There's the current capitalization table. Then there's the fully diluted version. All stock options, warrants are all converted. What does it look like then? And then something you do with some of the tools like Carta is you can actually make proposals. What if we raise this money? What would it look like at that point? Because investors often make those decisions. Should we raise more capital? The question I ask is, well, what will be my dilution? If you can run a report that shows if we raise this much money at this valuation, this is what your new ownership will be, it makes it easier to get to a final count on it. Let's see. So last slide here, and then we'll move to breakout rooms, is that there are signs of a toxic cap table. If you're an investor and you're doing due diligence, you want to look for these things. And at the pre-seed and seed levels, if you see too much equity going out the door, then it's probably not a good thing for the future. Sometimes what you'll find is Series A investors need a certain amount of equity to make it work, especially if you're a venture capital. They need at least 25% of the equity to make their business model work. If you've had too many convertible notes, too many safe notes, too much fundraising going on before that, then you may not have enough room to give it to them. And before the founder says, well, I'll just give you my shares, then they start worrying about you're not being motivated enough or incentivized enough to keep going. So you have to be careful not to raise too much in the early days. I see people using convertible notes like credit cards. They just keep raising money on it, which is cool, but eventually you've diluted, given away too much equity to get later stage investors to come into it. Sometimes you'll see 40, 50 investors on there. This group of doctors that everybody was putting in 5K each. If you have to ever go back and get people to sign off on things for future rounds, it's going to be very problematic to get that done. Absence of an option pool at the Series A level is a problem because you're compensating everything out of cash. And then cash only compensation just makes it difficult to grow and scale the business. And finally, you'll sometimes see excessive liquidation preferences. I've seen 3x, 4x, 5x liquidation preferences on here. It's just going to be very hard to raise funding from follow-on investors when you're raising that. You're giving out that much in a liquidation rights. If you have any questions about this, let's stop there and see if anybody does. Put them in the chat box. Let's see. So the question is, how many people is excessive on the cap table, 10 to 25 or 50? If you're at the very early stage, more than 25 people, in the seed, more than 20, 25 people is excessive. Typically there's 10 to 15. When we get to 20, 25, that seems like it's going to be a lot. Sometimes you have lots of family and friends that are coming in. So it may be best to create an SPV and just take up one slot on the cap table as well. If you're later stage, you can easily get, Series A and B, you can get 25 to 30 coming on there. And then at Series B, it goes to 30 to 40. So it goes on up from there. But the very early stage, when people are just raising money, sometimes I find that they were just giving out stock for various services rather than actual investment dollars as well. If there's any other question, please put it in the chat box. And before that, we'll thank you guys for joining us today. We'll go ahead and get the breakout rooms ready to go open at this point. And with that, I'll pass it back over to Kat. Thank you guys for joining us today, and we'll pick it up from there.